September 2nd, 1899, Volume 2. Still the same obedience, but a little milder. So with this obedience, a little milder, it seemed that my heart, from dead, began to live again a little bit. But in spite of this, it did not cease to be tortured in 1,000 guises. In fact, when obedience would see that the heart would stop a little longer in search for its Maker, almost wanting to rest in him because its strengths were exhausted, she would swoop down on me and wound me all over with her claws. And then having to repeat that refrain when blessed Jesus would make himself seen, "Do not come, I cannot converse, for obedience does not want it." Was this not the most atrocious and cruel martyrdom for me? Then, as I was in my usual state, my sweet Jesus came, and I manifested to him the command received, and he went away. Only once, while I was saying to him, "Do not come, for obedience does not want it," he told me, "My daughter, keep the light of my passion ever before your mind, for in seeing my most bitter pains, yours will seem little to you, and in considering the cause for which I suffered so many immense pains, which was sin, your littlest defects will seem grave to you. On the other hand, if you do not reflect yourself in me, the littlest pains will seem heavy to you, and you will hold grave defects as nothing." And he disappeared. After a little while the confessor came, and when I asked him whether I was still to continue that obedience, he said to me, "No, you can tell him whatever you want, and keep him as much as you want." It seems that I have been set free now, and that I don't have to deal so much with this warrior so powerful. Otherwise, this time he would have become so strong as to give me death. However, he would have let me make a great gain, because I would have united myself to the highest good, forever, not at intervals, and I would have thanked him. Not only this, but I would have sung to him the canticle of obedience, that is, the canticle of victories, and then I would have laughed at all his strength. But as I am saying this, a radiant and beautiful eye has appeared before me, with a voice, "Sing," and I would have united myself with you, and would have delighted in laughing, because that would have been my victory. And I, oh dear obedience, after laughing together, I would have left you at the door of paradise to say to you, "Goodbye," no longer see you again, to have nothing to do with you any more, and I would have been very careful not to let you in. September 2nd, 1901, Volume 4. Only through the cross will the Church reacquire her full vigor. Condition of the present society. This morning my adorable Jesus made himself seen, united with the Holy Father, and he seemed to say to him, "The things suffered up to now are nothing other than everything I went through from the beginning of my passion until I was condemned to death. My son, there is nothing left for you but to carry the cross to Calvary." As he was saying this, it seemed that blessed Jesus took the cross and placed it upon the shoulders of the Holy Father, helping him to carry it himself. While doing this, he added, "My church seems to be dying, especially with regard to the social conditions, which anxiously wait for the cry of death. But courage, my son, after you have reached the top of the mountain, as the cross is lifted up, all will be shaken, and the church will lay down her aspect of a dying one, and will reacquire her full vigor. The cross alone is the means for it, just as the cross alone was the only means to fill the void which sin had made. and to unite the abyss of infinite distance that existed between God and man. In the same way, in these times, the cross alone will make my church's forehead rise with courage and splendor, so as to confuse and put to flight the enemies. Having said this, he disappeared. After a little while, my beloved Jesus came back, all afflicted, and continued, "My daughter, how much I grieve for the present society. They are my members, and I cannot help loving them. It happens to me as to one who had one arm or one hand infected and wounded. Does he perhaps hate it? Does he abhor it? Not at all. On the contrary, he lavishes all his care upon it, and who knows how much he spends to see himself healed? And it causes his whole body to ache and be oppressed, until he manages to obtain the intent of seeing himself healed. Such is my condition. I see my members infected and wounded. I feel pain and sorrow, and because of this I feel more drawn to love them. Oh, how very different is my love from that of creatures. I am forced to love them because they are my own, but they do not love me as their own, and if they love me at all, they love me for their own good." After this he disappeared, and I found myself inside myself. September 2nd, 1904, Volume 6. Only God has the power to enter into the hearts and dominate them as he pleases. A new way in which priests must conduct themselves. Being in my usual state, I was feeling all oppressed, with the addition of the fear that my poor state might be all a diabolical work, feeling my soul and body being consumed. Then he came for just a little and told me, "My daughter, why do you trouble yourself so much? Don't you know that if all the diabolical forces would unite together, they could not enter into a single heart and take dominion of it, unless the soul herself, of her own will, would let them in? Only God has this power of entering into the hearts and dominating them as he pleases." And I, "Lord, why do I feel my soul and body being consumed when you deprive me of yourself? Is this not the diabolical breath that has penetrated into my soul and torments me like this?" And he, "On the contrary, I tell you that it is the breath of the Holy Spirit, which, blowing continuously into you, keeps you always ignited and consumes you for love of him." After this I found myself outside of myself, and I could see the Holy Father, assisted by our Lord, writing about a new way in which priests must conduct themselves, what they must do, what they must not do, where they must not go. And he attached a penalty for those who would not surrender to obedience to him. September 2nd, 1906, Volume 7. Luisa wants to do the accounts with Jesus. Jesus wants her to have no thought about herself. This morning, having to receive communion, I was prepared to make a day of retreat, that is, to prepare myself for death. And after I received communion, I said to Blessed Jesus, "Let us do the accounts now, so as not to leave them for the last extreme of my life. I myself don't know how I am. I make no reflection over myself, and by not reflecting on it, I do not perceive myself. And so I feel neither fears, nor scruples, nor agitations, while I see that others, who are far more good than I am, and even the very lives of the saints which I read, they all reflect upon themselves, whether they are cold or warm, whether tempted or calm, whether they confess well or badly. And almost all of them are shy, agitated, and scrupulous. All my attention instead is on wanting you, on loving you, and on not offending you. As for the rest, I take nothing into account. It seems I have no time to think of anything else. And if I engage in doing it, an interior voice shakes me, scolds me, and says, "Do you want to waste time? Think of doing your things with God." Therefore I myself do not know the state in which I am, whether I am cold, dry, or warm. And if anyone wanted an account of it, I certainly would not be able to do it. I think I did it wrong. So let us do the accounts now, that I may remedy it. And after I prayed him over and over again, he said to me, "My daughter, I keep you always on my knees, and so tightly as to give you no time to think about yourself. I hold you like a father holds his little child on his knees. He gives him now a kiss, now a caress. Now he feeds him with his own hands. And now, if inadvertently the little child gets dirty, the father himself takes care of cleaning him. Now, if the father shows himself afflicted, the little one consoles him and dries his tears. If he shows himself irritated, the little one calms him. In sum, the father is the life of the little one, and does not let him have the slightest thought about himself, whether he needs to eat, whether he gets dirty, whether he needs to clothe himself, and not even whether he needs to sleep, because forming a cradle with his arms, he rocks him to make him fall asleep, and lets him sleep on his own lap. And the little one is all the relief and the life of the father, while the other grown-up children take care of reordering the house, of cleaning themselves by themselves, and of all the other affairs. So I do with you. I keep you on my knees like a little daughter, and so intimately united with me as to not let you feel yourself. I think and take care of all of you, cleaning you if you are stained, feeding you if you need food. In sum, I anticipate you in everything, in such a way that you yourself do not perceive your needs. And by holding you intimately tight to me, it is a grace that I give you, because you escape many, many defects. While if you had the thought of yourself, oh, into how many defects you would fall. Therefore think of doing your office of little daughter toward me, and having no thought for anything else. September 2nd, 1908, Volume 8. True virtue begins in God and ends in Him. I am going through bitter days because of the continuous privations of blessed Jesus. He came for just a little and told me, "My daughter, the sign to know whether one has true charity is that he loves the poor. In fact, if he loves the rich and is available for them, he may do so because he hopes for something or obtains something, or because he is in sympathy with them, or because of their nobility, intelligence, eloquence, and even out of fear. But if he loves the poor, helps them, supports them, it is because he sees in them the image of God. Therefore he does not look at roughness, ignorance, rudeness, misery. Through those miseries, as though through a glass, he sees God, from whom he hopes for everything. And so he loves them, helps them, consoles them as if he were doing it to God himself. This is the good kind of true virtue, which begins from God and ends in God. On the other hand, that which begins from matter, produces matter, and ends in matter. As bright and virtuous as charity may appear, if the divine touch is not felt, both the one who does it and the one who receives it become bothered, annoyed, and tired, and if necessary, they even use it to commit defects. September 2nd, 1910, Volume 9. One should pay attention to what he must do, not to chatter. I was thinking about Jesus carrying the cross to Calvary, especially when he met with the women. And he forgot about his pains and occupied himself with consoling, answering, and also instructing those poor women. How everything was love in Jesus. He was the one who needed to be consoled, yet he was consoling. And in what a state he was consoling! He was all covered with wounds, his head pierced with most pricking thorns, panting and almost dying under the cross. And he was consoling others. What an example! What a humiliation for us! A little cross is enough to make us forget the duty to console others. So I remembered the many times in which, finding myself oppressed by sufferings or by the privations of Jesus that pierced and lacerated my interior through, and being surrounded by people, Jesus would spur me on to imitate him in the step of his passion. And I, though embittered down to the marrow of my bones, would strive to forget about myself in order to console and instruct others. And now, finding myself free and without having to deal with people because of and thanks to obedience, I was thanking Jesus, for I no longer found myself in those circumstances. I feel I can breathe a freer air, to be able to occupy myself only with myself. And Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, yet for me it was a relief, and I felt as though refreshed, especially in those who were truly coming to do good. In these times, truly, there is a lack of those who cast true interior spirit into souls, because not having it themselves, they cannot infuse it in others. So they teach souls to be touchy, scrupulous, light, without a true foundation of detachment from everything and from everyone. And this produces sterile virtues, which go about blooming and they die. And some think they make progress with souls because they reach minuteness and scrupulousness. But instead of progress, these are true hindrances which ruin the souls, and my love remains on an empty stomach with them. Therefore, since I have given you much light about the interior ways, and I have made you comprehend the truth about true virtues and true love, since you are in the truth, through your mouth I could make others comprehend the truth about the true path of virtues. And I felt contentment because of this. But blessed Jesus, after the sacrifice I would make, they would then go around talking. And so obedience, justly, has prohibited the coming of people. And Jesus, this is the error, that one pays attention to chatter rather than to the good one is supposed to do. About me also they chattered, and if I wanted to pay attention to this, I would not have accomplished the redemption of man. Therefore, one must pay attention to what one must do, and not to what people say, and chatter remains with those who make it. September 2nd, 1912, Volume 11. How harmful is the thought of oneself, and how much good does the thought of Jesus alone? The souls who are united to the divine will, whose only thought is to love Jesus, are like the rays of the sun for him. I was saying to my always adorable Jesus, my only fear is that somehow you might leave me and withdraw from me. And Jesus, my daughter, I cannot leave you, because you are fixed in me, and therefore you do no act which is self-reflexive and inappropriate to yourself. Neither do you have any care for yourself. For one who really loves me, reflection on and care of self, even in good, are like many gaps formed in love. Therefore my life cannot fill the soul completely. I am as though banned, cornered, and they give me the occasion to make my little withdrawals. On the other hand, the soul who is not inclined to the concerns of her own cares, but thinks only of loving me, takes care of me, and I fill her with everything. There is not a point in her life in which she does not find my life, and if I wanted to withdraw, I would have to destroy myself, which can never be. My daughter, if souls knew how harmful certain self-reflections are, they bend and lower the souls, making them keep their faces turned inward. The more they look at themselves, the more human they become. The more they think, the more they feel their miseries and become miserable. But if they think only of me, of loving me and being all abandoned in me, their souls straighten up, and by keeping their sight on me only, they rise and grow. The more they look at me, the more divine they become. The more they meditate on me, the richer, stronger, and braver they feel. The union with the divine volition leads the soul toward the oblivion of herself and to the contemplation of God. Then he added, my daughter, the souls who are united with my will, who allow me to give my life within them, and who think only of loving me, are united to me like rays to the sun. If the sun were unable to form its rays, it could not extend its light and heat. The rays give more beauty to the sun. Therefore, through these rays alone, which form one single thing with me, I extend myself upon all regions, giving light, grace, and heat, and I feel more embellished than if I had no rays. Now, one could ask a sun's ray how many courses it has made, how much light and how much heat it has given. If it had a mind, it would answer, I don't want to bother with this. The sun knows, and that's enough. If I had to give light and heat to more lands, I would do so, because the sun that gives me life can do anything. If that ray wanted to think about it and look back at what it did, it would lose its course and become dark. Such are the souls, my lovers. They are my divine rays. They don't worry about what they do. Their only intent is to remain fixed within the divine sun. If they wanted to think, it would happen to them as to the sun's ray. They would lose much. September 2nd, 1920, Volume 12, The Martyrdom of Love and of Sorrow for Jesus, because of the lack of company of the creature. I live in the midst of almost continuous privations. At the most, my sweet Jesus makes himself seen, and then he escapes me like a flash. Only Jesus knows the martyrdom of my poor heart. Now I was thinking about the love with which he suffered so much for us, and my always lovable Jesus told me, "My daughter, my first martyrdom was love, and love delivered my second martyrdom, pain." Each pain was preceded by immense seas of love. But when love found itself alone and abandoned by the majority of creatures, I raved, I agonized, and since my love could not find anyone to whom to give itself, it concentrated within me, drowning me, and giving me such pains that all other pains seemed a refreshment compared to these. Ah, if only I had company in love, I would feel happy, because with company all things acquire happiness, and they diffuse, they multiply. Love close to another love is happy, be it even the most tiny love, because it finds one to whom to give itself, one to whom to make itself known, one to whom to give life through its own love. But if it is close to someone who does not love it, who despises it, who does not care about it, love is very unhappy, because it does not find the way to communicate itself and to give him life. Beauty close to ugliness feels dishonored, and it seems that they shun each other, because beauty hates ugliness, while ugliness close to beauty feels more ugly. What is beautiful is happy to be close to something beautiful, and they communicate beauty to each other. The same for all other things. What is the use for a teacher of being learned and having studied so much, if he cannot find a pupil to whom to teach? Oh, how unhappy he is, not finding anyone to whom to teach so much doctrine. What is the use for a doctor of having understood the art of medicine, if no sick person calls him to make display of his ability? What is the use for a rich person of being rich, if nobody approaches him, and remaining alone in spite of his riches, not finding the way to make them known and to communicate them to someone, he may die of starvation. Only company is that which makes everyone happy, allowing good to be carried out and making it grow. Isolation makes one unhappy and renders everything sterile. Ah, my daughter, oh, how my love suffers this isolation, and those few who keep me company form my refreshment and my happiness. September 2nd, 1921, Volume 13. One who goes out of the divine will goes to meet all miseries. Each additional knowledge prepares the soul for another greater knowledge. I was lamenting to my sweet Jesus because of these blessed writings, which they want to put out. I felt as if I wanted to withdraw from his will. And my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, what? You would want to withdraw from my will?" Too late. After you yourself bound yourself in my will has bound you with double chains to itself in order to keep you safer. You have lived as a queen in my will. You have accustomed yourself to living with most delicate and nourishing foods, indomitable by anyone, but dominator of all, even of yourself. You are used to living with all the comforts, immersed in immense riches. If you go out of my will, you will notice immediately that, as soon as you go out of it, you will feel misery, coldness, the lost dominion. All goods will disappear from you, and from queen you will become a most miserable servant. So you yourself, upon feeling the great contrast which exists between living in my will and going out of it, will plunge yourself even more into the depth of my will. This is why I say to you, too late, and then you would take a great contentment away from me. You must know that I acted with you as a king who begins to love a friend who is very dissimilar from him in status. But his love is so great that he has decided to make him similar to himself. Now, this king cannot do everything at once and render his friend like himself. Rather, he does it little by little. First, he prepares a royal palace for him, similar to his own. Then he sends the adornments to decorate the royal palace. He forms a little army for him. Then he gives him half of his kingdom, so as to be able to say, "What you possess, I possess. King am I, king are you." However, each time the king would give him his gifts, he would look at his faithfulness, and giving the gift would be for him an occasion for new contentment, greater glory, and honor for himself, and a new feast. If the king had wanted to give to his friend all at once that which he has given him little by little, he would have embarrassed his friend, because he was not trained to be able to dominate. But little by little, through his faithfulness, he has been instructed, so everything is easy for him. So I did with you. Having chosen you in a special way to live in the height of my will, I have instructed you little by little, making it known to you. And as I kept making it known to you, I enlarged your capacity, preparing it for another greater knowledge. And every time I manifest to you one value, one effect of my will, I feel a greater contentment, and I make feast along with heaven. Now, as these truths of mine go out, you redouble my contentments and my feasts. Therefore let me do it, and you plunge yourself more into my will. September 2nd, 1923, Volume 16. In addition to the privation of Jesus, Luisa feels the pain of humanity separated from God, because of the bond she has with Jesus, and therefore with all humanity. The nations are preparing for war. I feel very embittered because of the privation of my adorable Jesus, more so since, making himself seen like lightning, he would draw me out of myself and then escape me like a flash, while I was forced to see tragic and gloomy things, rumors of wars, as if they wanted to involve Italy. Leaders of governments approaching other leaders, offering sums of money to make them fall into the net of the war. From the month of January of this year, when one day I was in great suffering, Jesus had told me that he was making me suffer in order to enlighten the nations, which, wanting to start a war, wanted to drag others along, offering great sums to draw them to themselves. What pain it was for me to go out of myself to see suffering peoples, and another war field being armed, without having my Jesus together with me to say a word to him, to snatch from him, even at the cost of pains, mercy for unfortunate humanity. I spent several days in this state, and my heart could not take it any more. I felt not only the pain of being almost deprived of Jesus, but another pain so hard that I myself cannot explain it. Then, as he made himself seen, clinging to my heart, seeking rest and refuge, for he could not take it any more, I squeezed him to myself, and I said to him, "My life, Jesus, tell me, where did I offend you that you don't come? What is this pain, on top of the pain of your privations, which lacerates me and separates me from you?" And Jesus, all afflicted, told me, "My daughter, did you perhaps place your will to offend me in anything, since you fear that I withdrew from you?" And I, "No, my Jesus, I would rather die than displease you." And Jesus, "So, a daughter who has always been with her father must be attentive to know the secrets, the manners, the reasons with which he deals with her. I have been with you for so long, and you still do not understand the reasons which force me to withdraw. But you have understood them, also from the grave evils you saw, when I used to come to you like lightning, drawing you out of yourself, and leaving you alone, wandering around the earth. How many tragic things have you not seen? And on top of this, the great preparations for war which the nations are making. Last year, France, by moving against Germany, rang the first bell. Italy, by moving against Greece, rang the second bell. Then another nation will come, which will ring the third bell to call them to fight. What perfidy! What obstinacy! This is why my justice can no longer bear so much obstinacy, and it forces me to withdraw from you, to be free in its course. And the pain you feel in your heart, in addition to the pain of my privation, is nothing other than the pain of humanity separated from me. Indeed, it is a horrible pain, so much so that my heart writhed and agonized. And now, because of the bonds you have with me, you remain bound to the human family, and you yourself are forced to feel this pain. The human generations which separate from me with their horrendous sins. Courage! Do not lose heart. Let me give free course to my justice, and then I will be with you again, and we will pray and cry together over the destiny of man, that he may no longer roam throughout the earth, but return to his God. September 2nd, 1924, Volume 17. Jesus strengthens the little child. The harm of distrust. The work of Jesus. I was feeling very oppressed, but all abandoned in the arms of Jesus, and I prayed him to have compassion for me. But while I was doing this, I felt like losing consciousness, and I saw a little child come out from within me, weak, pale, and all engrossed in profound sadness. And blessed Jesus, going to meet her, took her in his arms and, moved to pity, pressed her to his heart. And with his hands he touched her forehead, marking her eyes, her lips, her breast, and all the members of the little child with signs of the cross. And as he was doing this, the child regained strength, acquired color, and bestirred herself from that state of sadness. And Jesus, seeing that the child was regaining strength, pressed her more tightly to himself, to strengthen her even more, and said to her, "Poor little one, in what state you are! But do not fear, your Jesus will make you come out of this state." While this was happening, I thought to myself, who is this child who came out from me, and whom Jesus loves so much? And my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, this child is your soul. It is you. and I love her so much that I cannot tolerate seeing you so sad and weak. This is why I came, to infuse in you new life and new vigor." On hearing this, crying, I said to him, "My love and my life, Jesus, how I fear that you may leave me. How shall I do without you? How will I be able to live? In what a deplorable state will my poor soul be reduced? What a harrowing pain is the thought that you may leave me, a pain that lacerates me, takes peace away from me, and puts hell into my heart. Jesus, have pity, compassion, mercy on me, a little child. I have no one. If you leave me, everything is over for me." And Jesus, continuing, added, "My daughter, calm yourself. Do not fear. Your Jesus will not leave you. I am jealous of your trust, nor do I want you to even slightly distrust me. See, I love so much the souls who are with me in full trust, that many times I hide some defect or imperfection of theirs, or some lack of correspondence to my grace, so as to give them no occasion not to be with me in full trust. In fact, if the soul loses trust, she remains as though separated from me, and all huddled within herself. She places herself at a painful distance from me, and so, remaining paralyzed in her rush of love, she becomes paralyzed in sacrificing herself for me. Oh, how much harm does distrust cause! One can say that it is like the spring frost that arrests the growth of the plants. And many times, if it is intense, the frost arrests the development of virtues and puts cold into the most ardent love. Oh, how many times, because of lack of trust, my designs and the greatest sanctities are stopped. This is why I tolerate some defects rather than distrust, because those will never be so harmful. And then how can I leave you if I have worked so much within your soul? Take a look at how much I had to work." And as he was saying this, he showed a sumptuous and great palace, worked by the hands of Jesus, in the depth of my soul. And then he continued, "My daughter, how can I leave you? Take a look at how many rooms. They are almost innumerable. How many knowledges, effects, values, and qualities in my will. I have let you know how many rooms I form in you in order to place all those goods. There is nothing left but to add some more varieties of different colors, in order to portray more rare beauties of my supreme will, to give more prominence and honor to my work. And you fear that I may leave such a great crafting of mine? It costs me too much. There is my will involved in it. And wherever my will is, there is life, a life not subject to death. And your concern is nothing but a little distrust on your part. Therefore trust me, and we will get along, and I will accomplish the work of my will." September 2nd, 1928, Volume 24. How by virtue of the divine fiat, the created things are like members to man, and it gives to man their reason, and how by withdrawing from it, man gave a blow and severed all these members. How the divine will forms his mothers for Jesus. I was doing the round through the whole creation, according to my usual way, to follow what the divine will had done in it. Oh, how beautiful it seemed to me! How the divine fiat enjoyed its triumph, received its full glory, had its total dominion, and extended its life everywhere and in every place. So it is light, and it extends its life of light. It is power. It is order. It is purity, and extends its life of power, of order, of purity, in all created things, and so with all the rest of its divine qualities. Therefore, each created thing is sacred, more than a relic, because they enclose within themselves the creative power and will, and the very life of He who created them. And while going around, I felt like loving, adoring, embracing and kissing the sun, the heavens, the stars, the wind, the sea, because they enclosed, veiled, and formed as though many dwellings for He who had created them. But while my mind was wandering in the creation, my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, look at how beautiful are our works, pure, holy, and all orderly. And if we made use of the creation in order to form our veils, our vast dwellings, however we held back from giving reason to it, because the purpose for which they were created was for man, not for themselves, and therefore we reserved giving to man the capacity and reason of the whole creation, so that possessing its reason, He would give us the glory of the light of the sun, of the heavens, of the wind, and of everything else. So we placed the created things as members of man, so that possessing the reason of these members, He would use them in order to rise back within these veils, to find He who dwelled inside of them as King, and to bring Him the glory and the love of these members given to Him. But in order for man to do this, and to possess the reason that sun, heavens, wind, and the like would have had, and to keep the created things as his members, he was to possess the life and the dominion of our divine Fiat that would give him the capacity and vast and sufficient reason for the whole creation, and would maintain the communication and the bond and the inseparability with all these members, the created things. In fact, only our divine will possesses the full reason of what it has done, and we gave this will of ours to man, that it might give him the reason of all our works, because everything came out as orderly from us, and linked together as members to the body of man, because He was our first love, the purpose of the whole creation, and therefore in Him we centralized all the reason that was needed for it. Now, my daughter, by withdrawing from our divine will, man gave a blow and severed his dear and holy members. And this is why he knows little about the value, the sanctity, the power, the light that, as members, were already his. And the divine Maker remains without the glory, the love, the gratitude of the head of these members. See then how necessary is the return of my divine Fiat into the head, which is man, so as to restore the order created by us, and have the head put in its place, and the members reunited once again to the one who, so barbarously and with harm for himself, keeps them severed. Don't you yourself feel how my will alone has the virtue of putting you in communication with the whole creation, and giving you the flight? It gives you the reason of the light, of the heavens, of the sea, of the wind, and wanting to animate all created things with your voice, from the greatest to the smallest, it repeats your delightful refrain. It is I who love you and glorify you in the heavens, in the sun, in the sea, in the wind, and also in the tiny little bird that sings, in the little lamb that bleats, in the fragrance of the flower that ascends to you. and so on and so forth. It is the life of my Fiat that, since it has life in the whole creation, having life in you, makes you love within all things that are already its own. I remained pensive in hearing that, by virtue of the Fiat, man would possess the reason that the sun, the sea, the wind were to possess. And my beloved Jesus added, "My daughter, man too does this. He does not leave his reason inside the works he does. If he forms a house for himself, if he possesses a land and puts different plants in it, if he does one work or another, these are works that possess no reason. He keeps the reason for himself. And if he gives reason, he gives it to his family, which is not works, but his own children. And he wants them to have the reason of his works, that they may use them according to the will of the Father, so that he may receive from them the glory of his works. If man does this, why could I not do the same? Indeed, with more order and with multiple works for the good of man, so as to keep him near me, together with me, inside of me, and so very united to me. God is the head, and he as the members, and the creation as his members, and he as the head of it. After this I continued my acts in the redemption, and pausing when my charming baby Jesus was in Egypt, and my celestial mamma, while rocking him in his poor cradle, was occupied with preparing the garment for the little baby. Placing myself near the Queen Mamma, I made my I love you flow in the thread that was used for the little garment of Jesus, and I rocked the cradle to make my celestial baby sleep, making my lullabies of love for him, and asking him for the divine Fiat. And while it seemed he was closing his eyes to sleep, to my surprise I saw him raise his little head, and looking at our divine Mamma and myself, he said in a most tender tone, "My two mammas, my mamma and the little daughter of my will. My divine will unites them together for me, and makes them both be my mamma. Why is this celestial queen my true mother? Because she possessed the life of my divine Fiat. It alone could administer to her the seed of divine fecundity, to make me be conceived in her womb and make me her son. So without my divine will, in no way could she be my mamma, because no one else, either in heaven or on earth, possesses this seed of the divine fecundity that can do no less than make the Creator be conceived in the creature. See then, my divine will formed the mamma for me, and I made myself her son. Now it is forming for me its little daughter as my mamma, and it makes me find her near my first mother, so as to make her repeat her acts, braiding them together, and to make her impetrate its kingdom, and therefore making her repeat its divine seed and the fecundity of the Fiat voluntas tua in the creatures. My will alone can do everything, and can give me everything." Then, closing his eyes to sleep, while sleeping he repeated, "My two mammas, my two mammas." How tender and moving it was to hear him. How it wounded the heart to see him interrupt his sleep to say, "My two mammas." Oh, divine will, how lovable, powerful, and admirable you are! Oh, please, descend into the hearts of all, and place in them this divine seed of yours, so that its fecund seed may form for you your kingdom, and make you reign on earth as you do in heaven. September 2nd, 1933, Volume 32, channels, commerce between heaven and earth, traffics of the soul who lives in the divine will, contest of love between creature and creator. I am always the little atom in the divine volition, just newly born, and I feel the extreme need of being nourished and raised in its paternal arms. Otherwise the human volition rises in me in order to form its unhappy life. My God, have pity on me and do not permit that I either know or acquire any other life except that of your divine will. And feeling afflicted, oppressed, for the almost continuous privations of my sweet Jesus that keep me sacrificed on the stake of sorrow, that only God is witness to a martyrdom so hard. So I had the fear that my unhappy human volition would make some pull on me. And my beloved Jesus, in order to infuse courage in me, sustaining me in his arms because I could not endure any more, told me, "My blessed daughter, courage, banish every fear from your heart. This is the weapon that either kills or wounds love, and makes you lose familiarity with your Jesus. And I neither know how to remain, nor do I want to remain, without intimacy with one who wants to live of my will. It is as if she was not one single thing with me. If this were so, I would not be able to say that one is the will that animates us and forms your life and mine. But I would have to say, you have your will, and I have mine. And I do not want this, because living in my volition would not exist in you any more. Rather, I want that in every pain you suffer, be it even my privation, everything that you do of all your being, you always call my will, so that all your acts form the channel where it can find the way, the place, for where to enclose its goods and make them flow in abundance. According to the channel that you have prepared, every act that you do can be a channel of grace, of light, of sanctity, that you lend to my will, that will make you proprietor of the goods that it encloses in your acts, and it will make them flow for the good of everyone. See, therefore, how your being, your pains, your acts must serve me, has so many little channels in which I can always place mine. Depositing mine is for me happiness. It is giving me something to do. It is feeling myself loved and known. And therefore so much is my desire to deposit my divine properties in the acts of the creature, in order to render her owner, that I remain spying. I act as vigilant sentry for her. I use all my loving attentions in order to see if her acts are empty of human volition, and if she makes the call to my divine will, that finding the void in the human acts, makes use of them as channels, in order to deposit in them the greatest graces, the most sublime knowledges, the sanctity that more resembles it, and with this, it forms the divine dowry for its beloved creature. After this he was silent, and then he added, with a more tender accent, "My daughter, you must know that for one who lives in my divine will, there is no time to lose, nor can she pay attention to certain trifles, to fears, to oppressions, to agitations, to doubts. One who has to do the most must place the lesser aside. For one who must take the sun and enjoy herself with it, it is necessary that she does not pay attention to the little lights. And one who possesses the day must not pay attention to the night, because the sun is more than the little lights, and the day has more value than the night. And if she wants to pay attention to the one or the other, there is the danger that she does not enjoy the whole fullness of the light of the sun, or she does not do everything that the day can do. And it can be that by paying attention to the lesser, she loses the most. Even more because my divine will wants to remain always in the act of giving for who lives in it, and the creature must always remain in the act of receiving. And if she wants to pay attention to anything else, my will is constrained to make its stops in giving, because it does not find her attentive in receiving what it wants to give. And this breaks the divine current. And if you knew what that means, how attentive you would be. Other than this, you must know that as the creature does her acts in my divine will, she enters into the divine banks and makes her traffics of infinite value. Since she comes into our volition, although she is little, yet she becomes as owner and acts as owner of what our divine banks possess, and she takes as much as she can take. And since she cannot contain entirely within herself what she takes, she leaves it on deposit together with our own treasures. And we let her do it. We enjoy her traffics. And so much is our goodness that we give her the interest on the acquisitions that she has made. In fact, every time she does her acts in our volition, she opens the commerce between heaven and earth, and places in traffic our sanctity, power, goodness, love. And in order for our beloved creature to not remain behind, she ascends, and we descend into the depth of the human volition, and opening our commerce, we make the acquisition of the human volition, traffic so wanted and welcomed by us. And so we compete and mutually conquer each other. Good daughter, to live in our volition and not have she who has something to do with us, and we with her, nor to have what to say, nor let ourselves be felt, would be impossible for us. If this could be, it would no longer be our life that we develop in the creature, but a way of speaking, not a reality. Life feels the absolute need of movement, of making itself felt, of breathing, of palpitating, of speaking, of giving heat. How can a life stifle itself, to live and not make itself felt? This is impossible for God and for the creature. Therefore, do not alarm yourself when you feel that everything is silent in you. They are brief instances, because I am the one who feels the need of making myself felt, that my life exists in you. To be and to not make myself felt would be my cruelest martyrdom. I can do it for a little while, but not always. Therefore, do not give a thought to yourself. Live all abandoned in me, and I will think about everything. End of September 2nd. Fiat.